Welcome to Student Mental Health. I'm really glad that you're here, and hopefully, we will get through the material and you will learn some new information about how you are able to support your students in your classroom. My name is Dr. Terry Schroeder. I have 22 years of experience in education. Some of the things that I have done: I've been an assistant director, I'm an adjunct professor, I coach dissertation students, and I edit dissertations as well. I've been an assistant principal at a middle school, an elementary school. In addition, my teaching background: math interventionist, reading interventionist, achievement specialist, which I was coaching teachers, and also middle school teacher, math, language arts, social studies, and the like. And so I have a wide variety of experiences in education. And so I am here to share this information with you. As far as some of our norms go, we're just going to kind of keep it open and going. Keep your open mind, have your hands open, making sure you're taking the notes, sharing your ideas, and then also just taking care of yourself as we go through. Starting out here, just something that I want you to think about as we're going through this is we need to change what we can and manage what you can't. And that's from Raymond McCauley. And if you're not sure who Raymond McCauley is, he's actually a very interesting person. He's a scientist, an engineer, and entrepreneur. He is actually the founder of the first biohacker lab. And so he has a really huge background in science and really taking a look at the things. If you can change it, great. And if you can't, don't focus on that, but manage what you can change. So, looking at our agenda for today, we're going to have basically three major topics. We're going to take a look at what is student mental health. We're going to talk about a rationale of why you need, as a teacher, to be concerned with student mental health. And then also some of those strategies that you can use within your classroom that can support the mental health. Because as we know, if our kids aren't ready to learn, they're not going to learn. And so we want to make sure we're ready for that. So our goals, our first goal has to do with the definition. You are going to be able to define student mental health. The rationale one is you're going to be able to explain the importance of mental health and on student achievement and just overall well-being of our children. And then your takeaway is I want you to be able to have 2 or 3, if not more, strategies that you're going to be able to implement in your classroom right away on the first day. And so we are going to start with a community builder, sometimes called an icebreaker, but I like to use community builder because icebreakers have such a negative connotation to them. And so why do we want to start with a community builder? And this is definitely something when we are looking at student mental health that you are going to want to do on a regular basis with your kids, because it helps to get that conversation started. It takes the edge off. It makes people feel comfortable. It is that community builder. It gives the participants and your students a chance to share your experiences and your expertise and really making connections and building that trust with one another. And so, what we are going to do is we are going to do the strategy called 1, 2, 3, write something. And so, on a piece of paper, go ahead and you are going to write down one thing that you are proud of, something that you have done that you're super proud of. Then you're going to write down 2 things you've accomplished in this last year. It could be personal, it could be professional. And then you're going to write down 3 things that you would like to accomplish this year, coming up in this next school year. And so I'm going to go ahead and pause right here so that way you can take the time to do some reflection and come up with your 1, 2, 3, write something. Now that you've written them down, if you are working with someone else, go ahead and share out with each other and kind of share your thoughts, share your background, so that way you're able to build your community. So here we are. What is student mental health? And it's important to kind of define it because it's one of those things that um, everybody kind of has a different definition of what mental health means. And especially when we're looking at our students, because Things have changed over the last 5, 10 years about mental health, but there still is that negative twist and that negative connotation to mental health, and there shouldn't be. And so that's why we want to make sure that we're defining it. So when we're talking in this course here, student mental health, it's going to refer to the psychological, the emotional, and social well being of an individual. So it's really about everything that's going on in their head. Why is this so important? It's because student mental health and how they are doing in their head, it impacts everything that they do, how they think, how they act, how they're feeling that day, how they interact with others. And if we really think about it, if we are trying to build community within the classroom and we are trying to have an opportunity where our students are working together and learning in that learning community, if we have somebody who feels bad about themselves, if we have somebody who just can't think because they have stress or they have anxiety, they're not going to be able to talk, they're not going to be able to learn, and they're not going to have those positive interactions with their peers or their teacher. And so that's one of the reasons why we definitely need to take a look at our student mental health. Some of the common mental health disorders that you've probably heard of, we're talking about the mood, and that's where that depression and the bipolar comes in. And as we know, the bipolar is usually not diagnosed until later on, but there are still some tendencies with that. Anxiety, their personality, it could be an eating disorder, it could be PTSD, substance abuse, and a lot of the recent research on ACEs, those adverse childhood experiences. So, divorce, a fire in the house, a death of a family member. When we take a look at some of those, that impacts the student mental health as well. So, moving on to what the rationale, we kind of started a little bit when we were defining what student mental health is. Um, it's just as important as their physical health. All states have mandates of how much time students need to be in PE every week. Here in Arizona, we even have the extra recess law where on days that students don't have PE, they're supposed to have extra recess. And that has to do with their physical health. But we're really forgetting about the mental health. And that's why it's also overlooked a lot. And so, as teachers, kind of like with that quote, we have to be able to manage what we can and make those changes and make those adjustments. So, some of the student mental health skills that will help students get through: coping, ways to deal with stress, being able to interact and relate with others. What are the best ways to make decisions, and also working productively, making a list, getting through it, setting yourself some goals. And those are the things that will help our students with their mental health. So if students are not in a good place in their head, they will not be able to learn at high levels because their immediate level of concern is about what was going on at home. What's going on at home? Why am I feeling so stressed right now? I have anxiety. No one likes me, my friends, and that kind of thing. And so we have to address those mental health issues so that way our kids will be ready to learn. So, what we're going to do now is I'm going to take a little bit of a break here, and I want you to make a list of how you in the past have supported mental health in your classroom. Thinking about some of the strategies that you wrote down, go ahead and share them with anybody that you are working with. Um, and hopefully, some of those strategies that you have already implemented are some of the things that we're going to go through in this particular course. So, here are some of the strategies that we are going to use to support mental health in our classroom. The first thing is emphasizing that SEL, that social emotional learning. This is one of the hottest topics right now in education. If you type in social emotional learning, you type in SEL, you're going to get pages and pages of websites with resources and everything, and how you would be able to, implement this in your classroom. The number one source is what I'm citing here is CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They have a fantastic website. They have tons of handouts. So if you haven't been to their website, I would highly recommend going there. And so when we're looking at SEL, it's divided into 6 different categories. And so each of these categories are a little bit different. And as we go through them, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I know exactly what they're talking about here. So the first skill that kids need to be able to have is that self-awareness. So being able to figure out how they're feeling and how that interacts with the environment that they are around. What are they good at? What are they not good at? And having that confidence and that self-efficacy to be successful in that classroom. Because we know that when we are teaching math, when we're teaching kids how to read, if they don't feel that they're good at reading, they're not putting in the effort that they need to put in, and they're not going to practice, and practice is what they need. Also, social awareness, looking at their perspective and having empathy for other, appreciating diversity, respecting others within your classroom. We have so many great people coming from so many different backgrounds, and being able to embrace those backgrounds and make it okay within the classroom is what we need to do with that social awareness. And so the kids need to know where they are and what they're doing and how they fit into our communities. The next one is responsible decision making. This is a skill that needs to be taught to our kids. If we have a problem, how do we solve it? Is it a big problem? Is it a small problem? Is it something that I can solve myself? Or do I need help from a friend or a teacher and an adult? And so these are the things that we want to be teaching our students, is to be able to figure out the problem, look at all the different things that come to make that problem, be able to solve it, and reflect and figure out what we have learned from it. Self-management is also an important SEL skill, and this is being able to keep themselves under control, that discipline, that motivation. This is where the goal setting will come in. Our littles, our kinders and our first grade, as we know, they really do struggle with self-management. And once they've been in classrooms for a little bit longer and they understand how it works, that impulse control gets a little bit better. And so we teach our kids self-management and how to interact with the environment that they are in. So that would be one of the next skills. And the last skill is relationship skills. And that is that interaction with other people, being friends. How do you treat your teacher versus your best friend? Or how do you treat your classmate versus, say, your mom? And really taking a look at those different social interactions and what that looks like. And this is where that relationship building comes in, and teamwork, and the community builders that you do with your kids that would support your SEL as well. So taking a look at our first skill, SEL. So how have you used social emotional learning in your classroom? So let's talk about it. So the next strategy is setting that climate and culture within your classroom. You are the teacher, you're the one in charge of your students. And so what are some of the strategies that you can do that is going to set a culture that's going to be very proactive when we're looking at student mental health? And the first thing is having classroom expectations and calling them expectations as opposed to classroom rules. Traditionally, we've had rules like stay in your seat, raise your hand. And those are very negative, and those really set that negative tone within your classroom. So what you want to do is you want to state your expectations positively. So what would that sound like? That could sound like be respectful of the learners around you. And so if you have that as a rule, then you would be able to break it down. Was if you're being respectful of the learners around you, what are you doing? You're raising your hand, you're staying in your seat. those kinds of things. And so you really want to focus on those expectations. The next thing you want to do as a teacher is you want to have procedures and protocols for everything. So, what does it look like in your classroom if a student needs to ask a question? What does it look like if you have a student who needs to sharpen their pencil? What does it look like if I'm having an emergency and I think I'm going to throw up all over the place? What does that look like? So, having those procedures and protocols. So that way, everybody knows within the classroom how all of this stuff is supposed to work. So that way they feel safe and they feel comfortable and they can take care of themselves and they can take care of each other. So keep in mind, as one of your strategies, is you are the one that controls your climate and culture. You're the one that decides what is okay within the classroom and what's not okay. And actually, once you really set that tone for your class, the kids will start monitoring themselves. You won't even have to monitor the expectations after a while because they're going to monitor themselves and call each other out. And keep in mind, and this is one of the things that, as a newer teacher, like I didn't realize until, became a little bit more veteran in what I was doing, is that if you don't say something, basically what you're saying is whatever they were doing is okay. So you need to be able to feel comfortable calling the students out for things that they're doing that are not acceptable. Obviously, we don't want to embarrass our students or call them out in front of the class, but making sure that you are having those private conversations with your students. The next strategy is building solid relationships with them. So, what does that look like? When you say build solid relationships, the first thing is learning their names. Within the first day or two, and I know it's a challenge if you teach middle school and you have 180 kids during the day, but especially our elementary teachers, learn their names. Because if you are able to call them by their name as opposed to, okay, boy in the second row with the blue shirt on, you are showing them that you are invested in them as people. So you need to learn their names. Another strategy is learning about their family and their siblings. I've come from schools where many of our families have 4 or 5 children, some of them older, some of them younger. They also have cousins at the school. And so really learning who's related to who and where they come from. And, oh, I had your older brother. He was great. And just really building that positive relationship, because then those kids are able to go home and say, hey, I have Dr. Schroeder. I heard, she's a great teacher. And you're really kind of building up not only your reputation, but also the reputation of, really knowing your students and knowing the community that you're teaching in. Also, find out what makes them tick. What are their favorite things? Do they play baseball after school? Are they on a soccer team? Are they super good at art? And start asking them about those things, because sometimes at school we get stuck so much in that academic route that there are kids that have other talents that aren't brought out at school. So being able to figure out what those talents are and talk to the kids about them, you're investing in them. One of the other things that's really important is being able to say hi and hello to them each time you see them, and using their name if you remember their name. One of the things on my campus, my students know that as soon as they see me, I'm going to say hello and I'm going to greet them with their name. And some of them have kind of started a game with me to see if they can see me first and say hi. So a lot of times I'll hear my name kind of being yelled down the hallway. We're an outside school, so it's not as bad. But I'm like, okay, guys, next time you have to wait till you get a little bit closer, because they know that as soon as I see them, I'm going to say hi or hello to them. What does this do? All of these things build trust with your kids. It shows who you are. Some of the things that you will learn is once you've been at a school for a while, you get to know those families, you get to know those kids, and you're working with the toughest kids, those tier 3 behavior students, the ones that have the behavior plan, the one where you're calling parents twice a week. Those are the kids that you definitely need to build the most solid relationship with first, because you know that sometimes you're going to have to call them out on some challenging things, and they're not going to like to hear it, but they're going to still need to come back to your class the next day and be successful. And so it really builds that trust. I found that another way to build trust is being able to admit any mistakes that I've made, apologize to the kids when you make mistakes, and definitely follow through on anything that you say. Those troubled kids, the ones that are the most challenging, were always my favorite. And I'll tell you, 95% of the time, you can get them to do what you need them to do because of the relationship that you've built with them. They may be challenging in PE or art when they leave your room, but when they come back to their room, they know your room. They know what the expectations are, and they know what the consequences are if they're not following those expectations. So those are just some of the things that are important as you are building relationships with the kids. And so let's discuss that. So how in the past have you built solid relationships with your students? The next strategy is kind of taking a look at the social skills within your classrooms. And so we're going to just kind of talk about some of the things. I already brought up the importance of having procedures within your classroom. And that's the same thing here, is have a procedure or expectation for things that they're going to do on a regular basis, working with others. If you are having the kids work in centers or small groups, do each of the kids have a job? Is there someone that's going to be the recorder, the person who's going to be the timekeeper, the person who's going to be the facilitator? Have those fun, fancy names for it. Just so that way, when kids get into groups, they know what is expected and they know how to act. Another thing is to have a procedure for how to get your attention. We always have that 1 or 2 kids who are going to put their hand up every second they can, and they really just need your attention and your kind of affirmation that whatever they're doing is going well. And so having a procedure for getting the attention. Another one is ignoring distractions. We all know that at some point during the day, there's going to be another adult that's going to come in that's going to have to talk to you. The principal might come in, the assistant principal, your team leader, whoever. Plus, we are going to have those students who are going to have behavior challenges. And so we need to teach our students, the rest of the class, how to ignore those distractions. And those are just some of the things that you can do for this particular strategy. The next one has to do with demonstrating caring and gratitude. And this is really about you being that caring, loving teacher that our kids need. Now, of course, we need to have those expectations and we need to hold kids accountable, but at the same time, we don't need to be mean about it. We want to make sure that they understand, and you understand that students are people make mistakes. This is how we learn. Building that relationship with the kids really will create a community of it's okay to make a mistake. If we make mistakes, that's how we learn. And if I were to teach you stuff and you never ever made a mistake, are you learning anything new? And the answer to that is no. So then me as a teacher, I'm being a failure because I'm not moving you along in what you need to be successful. Another thing is really taking a look at manners. Having those basic expectations of saying please and thank you, you're welcome, may I, also, bless you, those kinds of things when people sneeze, and just really being that loving environment that our classrooms should be. All right, so the next strategy would be that mindfulness and the mediation within your classroom. And so keeping in mind that you need to be present with your students and getting rid of the distractions. And I know that you're teaching at home or you're teaching from a different place because you're online. So making sure that you're paying attention to your screen, you're paying attention to your kids, your cell phone is put away. You have a good background for your students so that way they are not distracted, and just really knowing that the time with your kids, it's for the kids. Also, taking small steps, meaning making a list, checking off things. It's not just about the big picture. It's how do you get to those big picture things. This is really helpful for our students who have anxiety, because if you give them a list of 15 things to do, they're going to be overwhelmed. But if you give them 3 or 4, they're going to be, in a good shape. They can do those 3 or 4 things. You give them the next 3 or 4 and you move on, and you'll learn which kids that is going on. Another thing is focusing on their growth, having that positive mindset of, I can't do this right now, but if I continue practicing and I continue working, I will be able to do this tomorrow or next week. And every day I'm getting a little bit better. So the next thing, a next strategy is reducing stress and also putting some exercise in your regular routine of being a teacher. And so some ways you can reduce stress for our kids is having an agenda for your class. First, we're going to do the warm up. Then we're going to talk about our objectives. And then we're going to do this. And then we're going to do that. And sometimes you can't always provide an agenda, but having some kind of predictable schedule for the kids that eases that stress and the anxiety of, oh no, what's coming up next? What's going to happen? So if you provide that for them, it just really helps them feel a little bit more comfortable. Moving on to having just that calm voice, having a good volume, so the kids don't feel like you're screaming at them or yelling at them. You also don't want to just whisper, because you want to make sure that they are able to hear. But one of the things that kids pay attention a lot to is that volume and that tone that you're using as you're teaching. And so making sure that it's a friendly tone, not negative, not condescending. And the last one here with being able to do some exercises with your kid is, if you haven't ever used the website Go Noodle. And so if you were to click on these, I will make sure that you have access to them. These are different videos that are free. It's a free educator account. You just sign up at gonoodle.com. And you have access to a whole bunch of different things that you can do. And so this one here, the first one are just all the different categories. There's some really great SEL videos in here. And then there's also a lot more of the exercise one. And that's where this We Are the Party is. All right. And one more strategy that we can use with our students is just checking in with them on a regular basis. And so when you are working with your students, having some kind of morning meeting with them, starting out the day. I know a lot of you are asynchronous, and so you don't meet with them on a regular basis. But when you do meet with them, being able to greet the students and having a format for what you're going to do. Are you doing calendar? Are you going to do like an ELA or a math exercise? Are you going to share some things with them? But really touching base with the students as much as you can, because that's what helps to build the community. Another thing that you can do is have lunch with them. Even if you are asynchronous, if you know you're going to eat lunch every day at 12, once a week, set up a Zoom or whatever format that your school uses, and have lunch with your kids. I know when I was teaching online and we had students online, I did this once a week with each of the different grade levels. And I would sit down and we would talk about, well, what's a healthy lunch and what are your favorite things to have for lunch? And what did you do last week? And it just really is a great time to help build relationships with your students. So, what strategies have you used in the past that have been successful to check in with your students? The next strategy actually has to do with you as a teacher, but also encouraging your students to do this, and that's the practicing the self care. And basically, in this here, what you're going to do is you're going to share with your students some of the things about you. What do you like to do when you're not in school? Is it something like you like to read? Do you like to play basketball? Do you like to take a nap? Go swimming, yoga, go golfing, just the different things that you do. I have a friend who loves to color and does coloring sheets. And so, really sharing with your students the things that you do outside of school that kind of reduce the stress and anxiety of what you do every day. And so, then encouraging them to do some of the same things. And as we know, our kids are probably going to be playing video games, and maybe some of the girls are, playing with their dolls and those kinds of stuff. But that's okay. And that's what we need our kids to be able to do. Um, and encourage the self care with the students for sure. And the last strategy that I want to talk about is a growth mindset. A growth mindset, if you have not had an opportunity to read the book by Dr. Dweck, Carol Dweck, she's a Stanford psychologist. I highly recommend you read this book because it really changed how I interacted with students, how I ran my classroom, because it really has to do with the belief that a person's talents and capacities can be improved over time, that it is about learning and it is about growing. And so basically, with the growth mindset, if you put in any of the effort and the time and the practice, you can learn and you can get better at what you're doing. And having a growth mindset within your classroom is an important fact because we are going to, as we are teaching, we are going to be teaching a ton of content that is going to be new to our students, things that they've never seen before. And it's okay for it to be hard, but it's not okay to give up. And that's where this growth mindset comes in. The opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset. And that fixed mindset means no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I practice, I cannot change it. It is what it is. And we don't want our students to have that because when they go into a task that is going to be challenging for them, and they already have that fixed mindset that I'm not going to be successful, they're not going to be successful. They're not going to learn. They're not going to grow. And so, as an educator, we need to be encouraging our students and really facilitating that growth mindset. And we are going to do that through persistence, grit, and perseverance, problem solving, be it it's okay to fail. Failure is a part of what we do to learn. And some of the things that we can do to also facilitate that growth mindset are setting goals and as a teacher, providing feedback. And it's not feedback on you're super smart. Your feedback is going to be about their work ethic and how they tried. And at first, they may have not been successful or they only got half the problems right. But after that, they kept learning and they kept trying and they were able to be successful. And so providing feedback for our students on how to improve is what we need to do as teachers. So let's do some commitments here. I'm going to pause in just a minute. And what I want you to think about are three different strategies that you're going to commit to support mental health within your classroom. And so go ahead and write those down. Okay, now that you have your at least three strategies that you're going to commit to, take those with you. get them implemented, try one at a time, and you should be good as gold. So, what I want to do is I want to kind of bring back our goals for today. Our first goal was you should be able to define mental health, student mental health. Our next goal is explaining the importance of student mental health on student achievement. And then our takeaways is having 2 to 3 solid strategies that you're going to be able to implement in your classroom that support mental health. And so I think we were able to meet all of those goals.